This is CBC Here and Now.
Part of our province is an island. We're a far-flung destination, They're on the edge of the continent. We need air access.
After more than a year of record low travel numbers, airports get ready for the province's reopening.
Before people can arrive, many flights have to resume.
It was a wet Friday for much of the province, but will it dry up? I'll have all your weather details coming up.
It's not for wires, it's not for transmission, it's going directly to their shareholder. And of course, it comes at a time when ratepayers are already stretched.
Why has Newfoundland Power requested its rates go higher?
The consumer advocate says it's to pay shareholders more money.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Anthony Germain.
And I'm Carolyn Stokes. Well, some people will be able to get the second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine sooner.
3 health authorities in the province have moved up second doses. It's Eastern, Central, and Western health regions.
Now, if your second dose appointment is between July 1st and the 15th, then nothing changes. You'll keep that appointment as is.
But if your second dose appointment is booked for between July 16th and August 5th, you can now rebook and move it sooner. If you received a first dose after April 16th, then you are not yet eligible to book that second shot.
Now, if your first vaccine dose is AstraZeneca, you can book your second dose for the mRNA vaccine if you'd like. That's the Moderna or Pfizer. If you want AstraZeneca as your second shot, details on those clinics will be announced later.
And finally, if you received your first dose outside the province before April 16th, you can book your second shot now.
Labrador Grenfell Health is the only health authority not releasing details today. It says details on second doses are coming next week.
Only 2 new COVID cases to announce in the province today. One is connected to the ongoing outbreak in Western Newfoundland, while the source of the other is still being investigated. It is also in the Western Health area. Meanwhile, the number of cases in the province has taken a big drop today, down to 80 because of 12 new recoveries. 1 person remains hospitalized.
Well, since the provincial government released its reopening plan this week, there's already movement in the airline industry. Air Canada looks set to return to Gander, and WestJet says it will increase its stops on the St. John's to Halifax route. Here and Now's Garrett Barry has more.
In this industry, things come quick.
This news was announced, and within 8 hours of that, I had contacted Air Canada. Air Canada had canceled its Toronto flight for the remainder of the year. So that flight's going to be restored now July 2nd.
This will be the evidence of the power of vaccines and a plan.
We've got 4 airlines at a new or incremental service for the peak summer in July, precisely because they have some level of certainty that they can fly and make an effort. They didn't have that certainty before.
These last 15 months have been a slog, traffic at record lows. But now, some signs of life.
There's all kinds of qualitative stories, even with my colleagues here at the airport, about people texting saying, I can't wait to come home, and what does the flight schedule look like? So, there's a lot of work to happen now.
So if these flights are coming back, there's one obvious question: cost. Say you're one of those people that Bragg mentioned, dying to get home on Canada Day for a week in St. John's. Well, based on what we can see, booking that flight today for a round trip would cost you more than $900.
I've seen both fares that would kind of rattle your feelings, and I've seen some incentivized fares because airlines are clearly hoping to get people back. So I think there's going to be a balance of dynamite deals and ouch.
It's a brand new world.
It's going to be less convenient, it's going to be more expensive, and there's going to be fewer choices because the airlines are all coming out of this a lot smaller. They don't have as many pilots, they don't have as many planes, they don't have as much reach.
And what might make the difference is how many Zoom calls we all keep making.
Because business travel, as much as you and I love leisure travel and taking our vacation and stuff, they don't make their money on our backs. The money is made on that businessman or businesswoman who's got 3 days into a big pitch that's worth $500K, and they don't mind paying a premium for a flexible fare.
Make no mistake, he says things are finally getting moving. Garrett Barry, CBC News, Gander.
Well, I made it back after last night. Again, I'm Jeremy Eaton, filling in for Ashley Brawwell. She's taking some well-deserved rest. So after much of the province saw really high summer-like temperatures yesterday, the sky sort of opened up and many parts of the province got drenched. So there was a lot of rain that has already fallen here in the province, especially on the southern part of Newfoundland, and there is more rain in the forecast. There's also the chance of a possible thunder shower. Now, there was a possibility of one last night in Lab West and in central Labrador, but this time in Cartwright. Now, I guess much like the 1992 smash hit from Blind Melon, many of you are hoping for no rain this weekend, but it's looking pretty unlikely. There will be a lot of clouds and a little bit of rain that will probably fall, so I wouldn't do your bumblebee dance just yet. But there's a lot more in the long-term forecast, and I'll come back in a bit and I'll tell you all about that. So there's lots. Don't go away. You never know what's going to happen.
I'm always doing a bumblebee dance. Well, in other news, there's a lot of work to be done before Newfoundland and Labrador opens back up. Kitty Vitty Brewery says July and August are typically the busiest months of the year. The business shifted to a home delivery model during the pandemic, and the owner says he's ecstatic to be reopening in a month's time.
I can't even tell you how busy the last 2 days has been. Everyone that we deal with, we have such a big following in the outport communities and the tourism sector in Newfoundland, and everyone is just so pumped right now. The phone has not stopped ringing. It's been the happiest I've been in probably 16 months now, I can tell you that.
The Premier and Minister of Tourism visited Kitty Vitty Village today and spoke with members of the media about the reopening plan. They also stopped at Kitty Vitty Brewery. Andrew Fury says it's natural that some people are nervous about reopening, but he's confident science is on our side.
This plan was built on science and evidence, and as we've shown, no matter what is happening in the province, including an election, we will take the definitive actions required should the evidence change. Right now, all signs, including rates of vaccination, the burden of COVID, locally and nationally, will allow us to reopen safely in July. If anything changes, we'll adapt accordingly.
Now, while the province prepares to open up to the rest of the country on July 1st, what about nearby St. Pierre and Miquelon? The border between the French territory has been closed since last spring, and yet with 75% of their population fully vaccinated and no active cases, we asked the minister responsible, why can't they come in?
I defer, as so many do in my position, to public health officials on this one. That is why we're where we are today, that we're starting to be able to open up this province. So we'll leave it in the good hands of public health. But I mean, obviously, there's tremendous momentum. We're seeing the vaccinations happening. This is happening finally after a year and a half. So, I want to see that momentum continue.
Now, Regan says the government is also looking at easing restrictions for rotational workers and for expats, such as those who live in the United States. And he says it's something that Ottawa and the province are working on together, but ultimately it all comes down to safety.
I see the stories that everybody sees and the testimonials of workers who were separated from their families for extended periods of time and the crazy routes that they have to take in order to be able to just do their jobs. And we will continue to push. I want them to get back to being able to support their families, keep their homes here, and do what they're doing, which is, incredible work all over the world. It is extraordinary that we've got some of the world's best at this. They shouldn't be punished as a result, but we got to be prudent with this pandemic.
Well, in other news, this week students in Sheshatshiu honored the 215 children whose remains were found at a former residential school in British Columbia. Yesterday afternoon, the children released 215 balloons in memory of the Indigenous children. Students walked from Sheshatshiu in a school to a recently erected cross meant to be a symbol of hope for the community. The gesture honored the lives of Indigenous children whose remains were found at that site of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. And tonight, the cross will be lit up, another gesture of love and respect to the lives lost. Now, this story has brought back a lot of painful memories for some people, so we want to remind you that any residential school survivors or family members of those survivors who are seeking support can call the National Indian Residential School Crisis Line at 1-866-925-4419.
Well, Newfoundland Power has put an application for a rate increase, and my next guest has something he wants to share with you about that. Dennis Brown, what's your issue with the rate increase application?
Well, the rate increase application was filed May 27th. At the same time, they filed a media release, this media release. And in the media release, they failed to tell ratepayers, the 275,000 ratepayers that Newfoundland Power serves, that they are effectively trying to increase their rate of return from 8.5% to 9.8%. That will be a 15.3% increase, and it would mean that ratepayers, if this increase was granted, would have to pay over $30 million over the 3-year period effectively to Newfoundland Power's shareholder.
Okay, so that's a lot of numbers there, Mr. Brown, as you know. So when I read the release, it looks as though I'm being told it's only going to cost me, on average, what, 80 cents or so on a $100 bill, on a $100 invoice. So you're saying that what doesn't meet the eye is what?
What doesn't meet the eye is the reason for the increase. They don't tell the ratepayers that the reason for the increase is that they are seeking a greater rate of return. They're trying to move their rate of return from 8.5% to 9.8%, which will give their shareholder an additional $30 million. And that's the reason for the increase. So they're not giving us the reason for the increase.
Which is return on investment for the shareholders.
Exactly. It's not for wires, it's not for transmission, it's going directly to their shareholder. And of course, it comes at a time when ratepayers are already stretched. Ratepayers are suffering the effects from the economy and the COVID economy and the Muskrat Falls economy and the rate mitigation, which is coming on stream. And it's a very poor time for Newfoundland Power not being straight and straightforward with their customers. Newfoundland Power ought to have told their customers exactly why they needed this rate increase and to whom the rate increase is going.
And you've gone so far as to suggest that they ought to apologize to ratepayers. Why is that?
Well, they ought to set the record straight. Ratepayers have a right to full disclosure, and the utility should be granting ratepayers full disclosure of the reason they need the rate increase. By failing to disclose that, it suggests a soft sell here. They didn't want to tell ratepayers for their own reasons that this money was actually going to their shareholder. When everyone else in the province is asked to make sacrifices, the unions, businesses, taxpayers, here's Newfoundland Power out looking for more. Where is their sacrifice?
Dennis Brown, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Anthony.
Newfoundland Power says it's requesting a rate increase of 0.8% or 80 cents per $100, as I mentioned there. The company says there has been no rate increase for the last 6 years, despite maintaining, upgrading, and investing in the electrical system. And a quote from the president and CEO, Gary Murray, reads, "Establishing a fair return on this investment is a component of this application."
Well, it's the end of an era for Mount Pearl moviegoers. The movie theater, what's often called Mount Pearl Square, or Sobey Square if you're from my generation, well, that has shut down. The theater remained despite 40 years of company handovers. Ultimately, it became part of the Cineplex franchise. In a statement to CBC, a spokesperson confirmed that the theater permanently closed its doors on Tuesday. The company says it was a difficult decision not to renew the lease, and no other explanation was given. The Mount Pearl Theater was a bit of a 90s time capsule, offering a more nostalgic movie-going environment compared to its Avalon Mall counterpart.
So we're looking at a live shot now of St. John's Harbour and the Narrows. What does tomorrow hold for the weather? Well, I'll have all the details coming up after the break.
Now, before we get to the weather, some news, good news from NAV Canada. It will no longer be issuing redundancy notices to 41 air traffic controllers in Gander. As the country begins to reopen, the corporation says it will ensure that it has enough staff to support the aviation industry. NAV Canada had issued notices to employees in Gander, as well as Moncton, Montreal, and Edmonton. Scott Sims, the MP for the Gander region, says this is a relief. He sent us this statement just moments ago. Our air traffic controllers, he says, are some of the best in the world at providing safety in the skies, and at home they are some of the best citizens we know. Sims continues, now with this news from NAV Canada, they can continue to live here and work here in the community that they love so much.
This weather update is brought to you by Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism. It's time to explore the great wide open. Plan your trip at yourbackyardbeckons.ca.
Time for a look at the weather. Happy Friday to you, Jeremy.
Happy Friday to you too as well. Not as nice as yesterday.
No, not at all. Wet one.
It was a pretty wet one, but at least it's not cold.
Yeah.
And I guess for our audience, it's not snowing. So when you're here in June, it's a little bit easier to be like, well, at least it's not snowing. But anyways, let's take a quick look at the highs. So let's head towards the green screen, pull up a comfy chair, and let's just have a look at today's highs here. So as you can see in the numbers here, it's a lot cooler than it was yesterday. 16 degrees in St. John's, 18 in Badger. You may remember yesterday Badger was a hot spot at 26 degrees. Now these temperatures were a lot higher yesterday, obviously, but they are also a lot higher than they normally should be at this time of year. So these are the more seasonal temperatures that we should be expecting, mid to high teens all across the island. Burgeo and Port aux Basques hit a high of 10. And up in Labrador, Labrador City, 14, Hopedale, 16, 21 in Happy Valley Goose Bay, 22 in Cartwright. So that was the highs today. Now currently, it's still sitting a little bit cooler than that, 14 in St. John's, 9 in St. Lawrence, and a little bit chillier as you look up into Labrador. So now there is some weather moving in, future tracker. So as you can see standing right in front of me, okay, there we go. So this is the system here is going to bring a lot of rain, and that is what could possibly bring possible thunderstorm to Churchill Falls, Cartwright, the Cartwright, in and around the Cartwright area. Now there's not a lot of rain attached to that, but there could be the chance for the second night in a row of some thunder showers up in Labrador. So you can see that the system that sort of drenched the Avalon Peninsula today and a lot of the southern part of Newfoundland has moved off out into the ocean where we can wave it goodbye. Gosh, I'll get it yet. Oh man, I was doing so well, wasn't I? I was doing so well. Gosh darn it. All right, let's see. So we'll wave goodbye. There we go. Wave goodbye to the green, to the rain. But as you can see now, that brings in the cloud cover early in the morning hours. And as you can see behind me, there's another patch of green coming up now towards Labrador, which is going to bring a little bit of a significant rainfall for central and western Labrador. So what are we looking at for tonight? Because I know that a lot of you are wondering. So it's going to be 11 degrees in St. John's, and if you look around that island of Newfoundland there as I step out of the way, you can see that there's a lot of rain. Now, there's not significant rainfall amounts attached to this. This is basically a little bit of drizzle, but the way that the icons work is that you can't really pick. It's either it's rain or no rain. There's no like in between, so that's why it looks like that. So if you think you're going to get a lot of rain in Gander, you're probably not. There's just going to be a little bit of drizzle overnight, but no real big accumulation. As you can see, there will be southwest winds on the Avalon there, 40 gusting up to 60. So let's move up to Labrador, aka the Big Land. Now, this is interesting because if you look at these temperatures, as I try to squeeze in between them, 1 degree in Labrador City, 1 degree up in Nain, 2 in Cartwright, 5 in the Straits, and 2 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. So it'll be a little bit chillier up there tonight, but I'm sure people who've lived there for a long time, they're definitely used to it. I spent 1.5 years there, and I was still not used to it after the 1.5 years. But that's just me. I'm a weak, thin-skinned townie, as they told me. So here we go. There's the future tracker is going to bring that rain system. It's going to start tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., and that's going to bring, I think, I wrote this down, but I'll wait till the next screen, but I should come up. So that's going to bring significant, I think 10 to 15 towards Labrador City and maybe 5 to 10 towards Happy Valley Goose Bay. And on the island, you can see there'll be a little bit of cloud cover tomorrow, so it's not going to be the nicest Saturday in the province of Newfoundland, but it's nothing that we're not used to. So there are patches of sun, but we'll get into that in the next forecast. So, the next slide tomorrow, here we are. So I got to get my bearings here now. So 20 in St. John's, and again, you see those rain clouds, but that's not going to be a lot of accumulation across the island. That's just a little bit of drizzle. Grand Falls, Windsor could hit up to 26. And then down there towards Port aux Basques and Burgeo, Humber Valley, there's a little bit of rain, but not that much. And if we look up there to Labrador, Cartwright, you could hit about 10 degrees tomorrow. And there's those rain numbers I told you about, 10 to 15, 5 to 10 millimeters possible there in Labrador. But after this, we're going to have the long-range forecast, because many of you are wondering, is it going to be nice on Sunday? And I know the answer to that. So I'll tell it to you when I come back.
Well, there are dozens of new places for you to get a COVID vaccine. I'll tell you the role pharmacies will play and when we might start to see mandatory masking and physical distancing end. That's coming up.
Well, this week brought news of some of the biggest changes to pandemic restrictions in a year. And today, more changes for how vaccines are administered, both first and second doses. So we thought it would be a good time to have Peter Cowan answer your COVID questions. So Peter, we're seeing pharmacies now offering doses. How is that going to work?
Yeah, health authorities in the province haven't released very much information about how exactly this is going to work, but here's what I was able to kind of piece together today. So yes, pharmacies in most areas of the province have now been given vaccines. What they're getting, I'm told, is Moderna. These supplies have been less reliable, but they've been getting better, and they don't have the need for super cold freezers, so it works better for a pharmacy, and the more doses the province receives, the more doses they'll give to the pharmacy. Now, pharmacies have already started advertising, and this is designed for first, not second doses. The hope is that people who may not have already been vaccinated because the clinics run by health authorities have maybe been too far away or the hours haven't fit their schedule will now have a closer option to get a shot. Eastern Health, for example, has put out a list of pharmacies. There are 70 pharmacies in the eastern region, and each pharmacy is booking their own vaccine, so you have to give them a call rather than having a central booking service. You can, though, continue if you want to book through the public health clinics. Those continue to be offered as well.
Okay, Peter, so for folks who have had their first dose and they're wondering about their second dose, hearing that they can get it sooner now, how's that going to work?
Yeah, so the amount of vaccine continues to increase. So the good news is they've started to move people up the line. Rather than waiting the 16 weeks originally, they're now moving it up to 8. And basically, we're vaccinating initially back in March, we were vaccinating about 1,200 people a day. Now we're vaccinating about 4,500 a day. So that means even accommodating all those people back in March, there's still lots of extra spots available to move those people up. So today, the health minister tweeted that 91% of long-term care residents have had their double doses. That's a good sign. And if you've had an appointment for the first 2 weeks of July, they're going to stick with those, mostly because moving those up might only get you up a week or two earlier. But for people who have their second doses booked for mid-July to August 5th, you can now book your shot earlier. And it's very likely that this is going to be a phased approach, so those are the people that are moving up now. Other people who maybe have appointments into August and September, we're hoping that as those first people move up, that they'll start offering earlier doses to others as well. Other provinces are expecting to get everyone their second dose by the end of August. Everyone receives the same amount of vaccines, so that might be reasonable, Carolyn, for us to start getting it as well.
Okay, a lot of people wondering, when are things going to start to get back to normal? Other provinces like Saskatchewan have announced a timeline to drop masks and physical distancing, and some places in the U.S. have done that already. So what's the plan for here?
This is one part of the plan that is much more vague than we saw with all those timelines about travel and things like that. It all depends how the summer goes. It could be part of step 3 in September. What they're going to do is examine the evidence, see how much COVID are we still dealing with, and make a decision then. There are kind of two things they're looking at. One is the mandatory masks in things like stores or on buses that you have to do right now. But Dr. Janice Fitzgerald says they've learned a lot about the effectiveness of masks, and it is a tool that they expect to continue to use for flu season, for example, in long-term care homes.
Masking will continue to be a part of that, but as time goes on, and if our epidemiology and other information that we have says that the risk is low, then we may be able to walk that, to reconsider that special measures order about mandatory masking.
Saskatchewan has said they'll drop their masking requirement by the end of July, but it has been a lot more controversial there with protests, anti-masking demonstrations. The opposition has been much less, so there has been less pressure on the government to try and drop those measures, Carolyn.
Peter, a lot of people wondering about traveling. People are booking travel for the summer, and whether you have to isolate and get tested will depend on your vaccination status. But for children under 12, they can't get vaccinated. So what happens to them?
Yeah, this is a good point, Carolyn. It's all going to depend on the adults they're traveling with. So if they're coming with someone who is fully vaccinated, they won't have to quarantine. As of July 1st, they'll be able to come in right along with the adults. If the adult that they're traveling with isn't vaccinated at all, even in July, they're going to have to isolate for 14 days. So it really does all depend on who they're traveling with. The hope is that basically, because a large portion of the population will be vaccinated, the risk that even if the children come in and they're carrying the disease, the risk that they're able to spread it and get other people really sick is going to be a whole lot lower, Carolyn.
All right, lots of useful information in there. Thanks so much, Peter. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Now, a follow story. Charges have been dropped against a New Brunswick doctor who was blamed for a COVID-19 outbreak in part of that province last year. Dr. Jean-Robert Ngola was charged with violating the province's Emergency Measures Act in May of 2020 after he traveled to Quebec for personal reasons and did not quarantine upon his return. The family doctor then tested positive for the coronavirus within days of coming back, and shortly afterwards, New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs blamed a, quote, irresponsible medical professional for a new cluster of cases in Campbellton. Ngola was suspended from his job and eventually he relocated to Quebec. He says it all took an emotional toll on his life and he wants the New Brunswick government to acknowledge that. A northern community is grieving in solidarity following reports of the discovery of the remains of more than 200 residential children. The town of Fort Resolution was the site of one of the first residential schools in the Northwest Territories, and for years residents have worried that there may be unmarked graves in their community. CBC's Juanita Taylor went there and she has this story.
Wilfred Simon thinks a lot about the children who never made it home from residential school.
I get so emotional just thinking of kids that stuck there from their parents and, taken away, and they're probably so lost, probably so hurt, and then they die, in the arms of, they probably don't even know who. All in this area.
Simon went to residential school. He fears there are unmarked graves here in the cemetery and in town. This community was once the site of St. Joseph's Residential School. 13 years ago, he called for an investigation to find out how many children died and who they were, but nothing was done.
They think that we're going against the Catholic Church, or we're not going against any church.
This is the site where St. Joseph's Residential School once stood. Children from across the Northwest Territories and beyond were taken from their families and sent here. But fires, shortages of food, and illnesses closed its doors in 1957. That's when the children were moved to another residential school in Fort Smith. Today, that legacy is on the minds of many people in Fort Resolution.
And he talked about children being buried in the yard here, too.
Lainey Bolio's great-grandfather went to St. Joseph's Residential School. She would like to see that site searched.
Yeah. I would love if we could use those machines here to do the same thing they did in Kamloops. I feel like it would be kind of a good sense of closure.
The chief of the Dene-Nukwe First Nation agrees.
I'm not sure if that really happened here. It'll be something that could be investigated, and we should push for it, and hopefully the community can heal from that, to get it out, say this really happened in our community, instead of hearsay.
The territorial government says it is willing to work with Indigenous leaders to get to the truth.
The more we talk, the more we heal. And the more we heal, the better people we become. And I believe we're going to get there one day. The Native people are very strong.
And that strength is what keeps Wilfred Simon patiently waiting for answers. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Fort Resolution, Northwest Territories.
Welcome back to Here and Now. I'm Peter Cowan. It was just 4 days ago that the provincial budget came out. The Premier promised a bold approach, but did he deliver? Well, tonight we want to look at some of the parts of the budget that you might have overlooked. Helping us do that is our political veterans. Jerry Rogers is a former NDP leader, Sandy Collins, former PC cabinet minister, and Colin Holloway, a former Liberal MHA. So, Colin, I want to start with you, and I want to ask about municipalities. We do have talk of regional services in there. What do you make of that and the budget that's in there for them?
Well, Peter, talking about regional governance and regionalization, I mean, it's been on the agenda of this government, I guess previous government, the last 10 years. I remember doing some studies about it myself when I worked in the public service. But the language has come out, seems to be very supportive, moving that direction, talking about a fair tax. 50,000 people live in unincorporated areas, as many as 350 other communities, or like I said, unincorporated areas. So municipalities struggle to balance a budget, to provide the necessary services. To moving to a regional model, I think there's still a lot of unknowns here as to what does that look like? What's the representation going to look like? We know that you can't necessarily attract enough people to sit on regional councils, municipal councils, sorry. Even with fire departments that are maintained by municipal councils, I mean, they barely have enough volunteers that respond to emergencies. There's issues of similarities in training. They're all vying for the same dollar, if they're looking for specialized equipment or PPE, or they're even to get a new fire truck. So the language is positive, but not really sure if everything is worked out yet in terms of what does this look like. But I do agree that we need to move towards more of a fair tax so that everybody pays for the service that they get.
Sandy, I want to ask you, because a lot of this budget was in the language rather than in the dollars and cents and specific things they're going to do. Is that the right approach here? Because back in 2016, there was a lot of criticism for the government essentially leaping first and then looking later, and they seem to be kind of doing the opposite now, looking before they leap.
Yeah, well, instead of the title, I think it's called "A Change Starts Here." I think the budget should be called "A Missed Opportunity," because Premier Fury and the government had people prepared for a tough budget, and Moya Green and her team laid the groundwork and laid out all that information for public consumption so people could be prepared and understand why these bold decisions would have to be made. And there was very little in this budget. I look at the investment side, there's lots of good investments, but of course investments and spending, that's the easy part. It's when it comes to cutting back and reining in spending, that's the difficult part, and that's what's needed right now. We have a spending problem. So you have to ask yourself, when looking at this budget, are we any better today than what we were 2 weeks ago, fiscally speaking? And I don't think we are. So that's still an issue. It's yet again, government after government does it. It's kicked the can down the road. And I think this is essentially what this budget is.
But I want to ask about that, because the flip side is, if they made a whole bunch of harsh cuts, even some of the things they're talking about there in terms of, whether it's selling off parts of Nalcor or, eliminating it altogether. The NLC is under, review there. We could be selling off parts of that like we saw in Alberta. So, aren't many of these things, though, things that are going to need to be thought through rather than just saying immediately, hey, we're going to cut a bunch of jobs or we're going to do this right away, only to realize maybe later on it wasn't such a great idea?
Well, these aren't new ideas is the thing. And, while Moya Green raised a bunch of ideas, most of those weren't barn burners and, things that we hadn't known before. So this has been talked about for some time. Even you mentioned back in 2016. I don't know if that was really the right approach, because it was vast, and I don't know if some of those things were very well thought out, but that was 2016. We're in 2021 now, and a lot of water's under the bridge. And, when we're talking about immediate needs and the province having to borrow, and it was just last year when Premier Ball, or 2 years ago, I guess, Premier Ball had written the Prime Minister and said, we're going to have trouble borrowing money. These are the conversations that are happening, I would hope, within government over the last number of years. So I think there was some probably immediate actions they could take, as opposed to just saying more consultation. We're going to have to review it. We're going to have to look into it. Again, are we any better today than what we were 2 weeks ago? I don't think so. So has this budget helped us any, and I'm not sure it has with regards to getting our spending under control.
I don't think that we have a spending problem. We do have a revenue problem. And when we look at the issue, well, for instance, we've been in austerity since 2016 because of the policies that were brought down in 2016 and the budget coming down in 2016. Attrition, salary freezes, costing freezes, which doesn't take into account the inflation that we're working with as well. And the whole issue of privatization, we have seen more and more privatization in our public sector. For instance, when I was an MHA, the cleaning and maintenance of Confederation Building, those used to be public sector jobs. Then that was privatized. So people who had well-paying jobs for the work that they were doing, with benefits, with pensions, are now handled by a company where all the workers get minimum wage, no benefits, no pensions. We saw often people coming to work sick because they didn't get sick days, and they would be coming to work sick to clean the Confederation Building. Those kinds of issues where we have to cut, at whose expense? And who really ends up being the victim of the cuts? And how does that improve the life of the people who live in Newfoundland and Labrador? How does it improve our economy when we have more and more people, particularly women, working in these low-paying jobs? And again, one of the things that government should have looked at and made a commitment to is around minimum wage at $15 an hour. So with the attitude that we have a spending problem, then results in a number of cuts or privatization. We are weakening our people. It's not expanding our economy. We are actually shrinking our economy and weakening our own people.
So just thinking about, the revenue side of things. So, out of a $9.3 billion budget, about $4 billion is taxation. There's an introduction of some higher tax brackets. I mean, we expected that because the PERT report was recommending that. But honestly, as a taxpayer, I was expecting that I was going to see some marginal increase, and I was prepared to absorb that because I knew it was a bit of pain for the next 5 years. That didn't happen. So that's a bit disappointing for me. When you think about these new higher tax brackets, I mean, how many people are actually in those brackets that is going to realize some significant dollars for the provincial government? I don't think they're there. They weren't there when I was an MHA. And I don't think, as Jerry says, many people are working for minimum wage or less. Otherwise, why would, in the last election, there be a push to have $15 as a minimum wage? If everybody is making $140,000, $200,000, $250,000, up to $1 million. So I don't see that it's there, and I don't think we're going to realize that. Even some of the other measures that are in this about, common services across healthcare. I mean, this stuff is, as Sandy says, this stuff has been studied before. I don't think there's any money to be realized from that, maybe $1 million. So for me, this budget is a bit disappointing. I thought, as Jerry says, there is a revenue problem here, not necessarily a spending problem. And this budget hasn't taken us to that place.
Well, thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Let's see who's celebrating birthdays and anniversaries. Happy 68th anniversary to Stuart and Cindy Button in Mount Pearl. Happy 50th anniversary to Byford and Linda Garnier in Clarenville. Congratulations to John and Winifred Kennedy in St. John's. They're celebrating their 62nd anniversary. And wishing Gary and Mary Blanche Hiscock in Winterton a happy 50th anniversary. Congrats to Dudlix and Olive Toop in Corner Brook. They are celebrating their 60th anniversary.
Happy 65th wedding anniversary to Clyde and Dorothy Best of Chamberlains. Anniversary greetings going out to Eric and Jean Lane of Glovertown, now living in Grand Falls, Windsor. They're celebrating 60 years of marriage. Dugald and Margaret Warren of Stephenville are celebrating their 57th wedding anniversary. Congratulations. Happy 55th anniversary to Monty and Sheila Rowe of Happy Valley Goose Bay. Happy 72nd anniversary to George and Sylvia Roach of Coley's Point.
Happy 62nd anniversary to Bob and Emily Bailey in Southlands. And congratulations to Fred and Elizabeth Hatcher from Shea Heights, now living in Torres Cove. They're celebrating 59 years of marriage. Happy 54th anniversary to Matt and Bertha Kelly in Port au Choix. Happy anniversary to Eric and Dorothy Butt in Shoal Harbour. They're celebrating their 56th wedding anniversary. Happy 50th to Lauren and Joyce Barrett in Arnold's Cove.
Anniversary greetings going out to John and Nell Marr of CBS. It's their 53rd anniversary. Now to some birthdays. Happy 97th birthday to Laura Burry from St. Lawrence, now living in Paradise. Happy 91st birthday to Kevin Tobin of Patrick's Cove. Happy 90th birthday to Fred Tulk of Shea Heights. Birthday greetings going out to Annie Lovelace of Seal Cove. She's turning 94.
Happy birthday to Ann Penny in Lewisport. Ann's turning 93. And wishing Beth Boulos Ryan a very happy 91st birthday. Happy 92nd birthday to Henry House from Bellburns, now living in Corner Brook. And birthday wishes going out to Lydia Wells from Hare Bay, now living in Botwood. She's turning 92. Walter Strickland in Port aux Basques is also celebrating his 92nd birthday.
Happy 91st birthday to Vivian Genge of Another Point, now living in Flowers Cove. Birthday wishes going out to Winnie Skiffington of Musgrave Town. She's turning 91. Happy 92nd birthday to Audrey Harris of New Chelsea. And happy birthday to Rita Maddock. She's turning 101. Hope you have a wonderful birthday. Another fine crowd. Congratulations once again. And Jeremy is back with a look at the long range.
Yes, we're going to take a look at the long range forecast to see what sort of weather we have in store for the weekend. So we'll take a quick look. As you can see, that's my good pal, my good friend, Future Tracker. This is going to tell us sort of what's going to happen. As we learned last night, when you see the green and the yellow, it's probably not good. So that's sort of going to be some rainfall making its way across the big land and the parts of the northern peninsula. As you can see, it's going to move off into the ocean, which is where it should stay, at about 7 o'clock on Sunday morning. So you can see we're looking at a lot of cloud cover there for the island and much of Labrador. And as you can see, it moves further away. But like with all good things, I bet you there's going to be another system coming in. But let's just wait and see how that goes. So if you're thinking about what to do on Sunday, other way, there we go. So it's going to be about 19 degrees. You can see there's a lot of clouds on the island. That's going to be a little bit of drizzle. There doesn't seem to be a lot of accumulation at this point. So there's going to be a little bit of rain falling there. But the temperatures are going to be sitting into the high teens. Well, the early teens there in the Straits in St. Anthony. Well, 12's not really a teen. 12 in Marystown. Labrador, you're going to see a bit of sun there on Sunday fun day. But it's still going to be a little bit chillier, 16, 14, and 8 up in Nain. Now, as I was talking about Future Tracker, you can see the big green monster there basically engulfing Labrador, the northern peninsula, and part of central Newfoundland. So that's going to come in over Monday. So that's going to bring some rain. So if you're thinking about hanging up your laundry to dry outside, Monday afternoon, probably not a good time. You can follow me for more life hacks. So now, what are we looking ahead for Monday? Again, now the temperatures are going to jump up into the 20s, but we're still sitting, I'm looking the wrong way again. We're still sitting at 17 degrees in St. John's. You're going to be 22, 23 in Gander, 17 in St. Anthony. Now, there's a little bit of rain going to be there, but again, the accumulation is not that much. But this is Monday, so we'll worry about that on Monday. Let's just think about Sunday and Saturday for now, but I'll just give you the lowdown. Up in the big land, you're going to see a bit of rain. 21 in Labrador City, 12 in Cartwright, 10 degrees in Nain. A little bit of rain is going to fall. And as you can see, there we go. That green monster, that green rain, that precipitation Monday overnight, is sorry. So good news. Good news. By Wednesday overnight, it's all going to clear up, and there's expected there is a forecast, not my forecast because I can't make forecasts, but other people, meteorologists, have forecasted that there could be sun that we see Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, which will be a good sign. So we're quickly going to look at the long range, but I'm well over time. You can see that. Is it going to be sun on the weekend? Probably not in eastern Newfoundland. Central Newfoundland, probably not, but you might see it on Sunday in Grand Falls, Windsor, and 26 degrees. Pop over there to western Newfoundland. Are you going to get sun this weekend? Probably not. But look at those temperatures, 26 and 15. And again, for central Labrador or eastern Labrador, you might see the sun on Sunday. And then again, for western Labrador, you'll probably see the sun in 16, and then probably a little bit of rain that is going to come in for the rest of the week. And that's all I got.
And that's a lot.
That is, I was only like a few, how much over was I?
That's fantastic.
Okay, good.
But want to get some news of our own to share tonight in between the Jeremy Eaton Hour. Here Now has been recognized with some national awards, including Best TV Newscast in Canada.
Yeah, we told you a couple of weeks ago about our regional award wins from the Radio and Television News Directors Association, and now Here and Now has won on the national stage.
Yes, Here and Now took home Best TV Newscast in Canada. This episode was considered by the judges our coverage of the death of John Crosby in January of 2020.
And just a week later, as we know, Snowmageddon hit. Boy, it's been some time, hasn't it? The last couple of years. It shut down the Northeast Avalon for a week. Here and Now won nationally for Best Breaking TV News for its coverage of that event. Our station lost power, and we managed to get on the air barely with help from our colleagues at our sister station in Nova Scotia. So thank you, CBC Nova Scotia.
Yeah, what a day. And also, CBC NL won for Best Continuing Coverage of Domestic Violence. In this series launched last year, reporter Ariana Kelland and producer Rob Antle reported on several aspects of intimate partner violence, including the children caught in the crossfire.
And we're thrilled to get these awards, but of course that's not why we come here and do this each night, not at all.
No, the reward is getting to share your stories and receiving your messages throughout the week.
We also want to congratulate our radio colleagues. The ratings are in. The St. John's Morning Show, On the Go, and Weekend AM are all the #1 shows in their time slot. Well deserved, and a lot of credit and hard work. People deserve their #1 spots. So that was good.
Chrissy, Rom, Ted Blades, Heather, Paula, it's fantastic. Great way to round out the week.
Yeah.
Plus,
pat on the back on Friday.
Plus, we have a week more of Jeremy, so it's like the generosity never stops.
I'll probably just get more annoying, but who's to say?
You're not annoying.
Not annoying. It's fun. You're doing an excellent job.
Well, thank you. I'm trying, but I'm trying not to be too much, but that's hard. Because I don't know, when I do live TV and I start talking, I don't know where it's going to go. So
no, you're like that funny uncle that nobody can get too much of, Jeremy, so don't worry about it.
I thought that funny uncle that nobody can get rid of.
Have a great weekend.
Good night, everyone. See you Monday.